I never expected a Little League game to be the night that unraveled everything I thought I knew about the people I trusted with my son. It was a Thursday in late April. My son, he just turned 9 that spring, had been playing rec baseball since he was 6. He loved it. Every Saturday morning for 3 years, I'd watched him sprint onto that field like the grass itself was exciting, like the whole world was just dirt and pop flies and the smell of a new glove. But that Thursday evening, driving home from the regional qualifier, something was wrong. He didn't talk. My son always talked after games. Win or lose, he'd replay every inning from the back seat, gesturing wildly, practically climbing over the center console. That night he sat with his forehead against the window, cleats still caked with red clay, and said nothing for 11 miles. I reached over and turned the radio off. "You okay, bud?" "Yeah." He didn't look at me. Tough game. We'd lost 4-2. He'd struck out twice. "Dad." He said my name the way he only does when something is serious. Not in a 9-year-old way. In an older way. A way that made the hairs on my arm stand up. "What is it?" He kept staring out the window. "Can we sit in the driveway for a minute when we get home? Before we go inside?" "Of course we can." We pulled in around 8:45. I cut the engine. The porch light was on and I could see my wife's silhouette moving through the kitchen window. The neighborhood was quiet except for someone mowing 2 streets over, even at that hour. My son unclipped his seatbelt but didn't move to get out. He just sat there, turning his batting gloves over in his hands, the Velcro making a soft ripping sound over and over. I waited. "Coach Delaney," he finally said. "He does something during the cool-down stretches." I kept my voice completely level. "What do you mean?" "He makes us do the hip stretch, the one where you're on your knee." He stopped. Started again. "He always comes and puts his hands on certain kids to fix their form," he says. "But it's not the right place, Dad. It's not where you'd fix form." Everything in me went very, very still. "Has he done this to you?" He nodded without looking up. "A few times. Since March." I put my hand on the back of his neck. I didn't say anything for a moment because I didn't trust what would come out of my mouth. My son, my boy, who slept with a Cardinals pennant above his bed and still asked me to check for spiders before he showered, had been carrying this since March. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of Saturdays and Thursday practices and me standing at the chain link fence, coffee in hand, watching and seeing absolutely nothing. "You did the right thing telling me," I said. "I promise you that, and nothing that happens next is your fault. You understand?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were red at the rims, but he wasn't crying. "Are you gonna be mad?" "Not at you. Never at you." We stayed in that driveway another 10 minutes. I let him talk at his own pace. He told me the other kids it happened to, 2 he was sure of, 1 he suspected. He told me Delaney had told them it was normal coaching contact, told them their parents wouldn't understand, would just think they were making trouble and get them benched. He'd been methodical about it. Specific. He'd chosen boys whose fathers traveled for work. Boys who were shy. Boys who desperately wanted to make the travel team next fall. My son wanted nothing more in the world than to make that travel team. Delaney had known exactly who to pick. My wife met us at the door. She read my face the way she's learned over 16 years and immediately sent our son upstairs with a snack and the promise that I'd come up to talk more before bed. When he was out of earshot, I told her everything. I watched her hand find the kitchen counter. "We need to call someone tonight," she said. I know. I was a high school history teacher. My wife worked in HR for a regional hospital network. Between us, we understood paperwork, institutional behavior, and the particular way organizations protect themselves before they protect people. We knew this wasn't going to be simple. I called the non-emergency police line at 9:30. The officer who took my initial report was professional and calm, and I was grateful for it. He said a detective from the Crimes Against Children unit would contact us the following morning to schedule a formal statement. He also said, and this was the first crack in the wall, that Coach Delaney was something of a known figure in the County Youth League. 3-time Regional Coach of the Year. Founded the scholarship fund that sent 4 kids to sports camps each summer. His name was on the banner outside the Recomplex. I thanked the officer and hung up and sat with that information for a long time. The detective who called Friday morning was named Roe. She was direct, not unkind, and explained the process clearly. A forensic interview with my son at the Child Advocacy Center conducted by a trained specialist in a child-friendly environment. A separate conversation with the other families if we identified them. A review of any available footage from the complex. She told me not to contact Delaney, not to contact the league, and not to discuss it with other parents yet, as it could compromise the investigation. I agreed to everything she said. And then I went to the rec complex's website and looked up the board of directors. The president of the Tri-County Youth Athletic Association was a man named Aldous Kepler. He'd been president for 9 years. There was a photo of him at last summer's opening ceremony, standing at a podium, one arm around Coach Delaney, both of them grinning. The caption read, "A true partnership built on community values." I closed the laptop. My son's forensic interview was Monday. He was extraordinary. I watched through a one-way window as a woman named Dr. Whitfield, gentle, unhurried, with a quiet authority that put him at ease, walked him through what happened. He was clear. He was consistent. He named dates, described the field location, described what Delaney wore on certain days. He was 9 years old, and he gave testimony with more precision than most adults I've seen. Afterward, Dr. Whitfield came to speak with my wife and me privately. She said his account was credible and detailed. She said she'd seen this pattern before. The strategic selection of targets, the normalization framing, the implied threat about team status. She said Coach Delaney had been doing this for a while. Detective Rowe confirmed 2 days later that a second family had come forward independently. Their son was 8. And then on Thursday, exactly 1 week after my son told me in the driveway, Detective Rowe called with news that made my stomach drop. The league president, Kepler, had gotten wind of the investigation. He'd called the detective supervisor, not to cooperate, to express concern about what an investigation would do to the league's reputation heading into the summer season. He used the phrase due diligence several times. He mentioned the scholarship fund. He mentioned the league's partnership with 3 local sponsors. He mentioned that Delaney had passed every background check and that allegations of this nature needed to be handled carefully. "He's trying to stall it," my wife said when I told her. "He's trying to kill it." I'm an ordinary person. I teach AP history to juniors and seniors who spend half the class on their phones. I coach JV soccer in the fall because nobody else wanted the job. I am not a crusader. I don't particularly like confrontation. But I sat at my kitchen table that night and thought about my son in the car, turning those batting gloves over and over, waiting to see if I would be the kind of father he could trust. I started making phone calls. The first was to a parent I'll call Gwen, not her real name, but she knows who she is. Her son had quit baseball the previous fall after 2 years of loving it. Sudden, no explanation. He'd started having stomach aches every Sunday night. She'd assumed it was school anxiety. I asked her gently if she'd be willing to talk to her son, now that another family had come forward, now that there was an official investigation open. There was a long pause on the line. "He told me something last October," she said quietly. I didn't know what to do with it. His father said he was probably exaggerating. I should have pushed harder. I should have. "You're pushing now," I said. "That's what matters." The second call was to a man I'd seen at a dozen games, never exchanged more than weather talk with. I'll call him Stanton. His son was on the travel team, the one all the rec kids aspired to. When I explained why I was calling, he went quiet for a moment, then said, "We had him see someone in February. A counselor. She said he'd experienced something traumatic, but he wouldn't say what." I assumed it was kids at school. By Sunday, I had spoken to 5 families. 4 of them had noticed something. 2 had stories. I brought everything to Detective Rowe on Monday morning. Names, summaries, contact information. I also brought something else. Something I want to be honest about, because I'm not proud of how I got it, but I don't regret it either. The rec complex's camera system had been installed 3 years earlier through a grant. I knew this because I'd helped write the grant application as part of the league's parent volunteer committee. I also knew the system ran on commercial-grade software that, at the time of installation, our IT volunteer, a retired network engineer, had flagged as having a known vulnerability in its remote access portal. He'd written it up in the meeting minutes. Nobody had ever patched it. I accessed 3 weeks of footage from Camera 4, which covered the back half of Field 2 and the area near the equipment shed. I am not going to claim I was certain it was legal. I knew it was a gray area at best. What I found on that footage was not ambiguous at all. I saw Delaney calling individual boys away from the group during cooldown. I saw the positioning. I saw the contact that was not about form. I saw my son's face afterward on one of those recordings, the way he shook it off and jogged back to the group like he was trying to leave his body behind. I burned 4 copies to USB drives, gave one to Detective Rowe, one to the family attorney we'd retained, one to my wife, and locked one in the safe in my closet. Rowe was quiet for a moment when I handed it to her. Then she said, "We'll need to establish the chain of custody on this. Where it came from is going to matter." "I know. My attorney has the documentation." She nodded slowly. "You understand the DA may or may not be able to use this directly." "I understand. But you can use it to know where to look and to get your own warrant." She looked at me for a long moment. "Yes, we can." The warrant came through 6 days later. The search of Delaney's personal devices uncovered a folder of photographs organized by date going back 4 years. Communication records with a former coach in another county who had been quietly removed from his position 2 seasons earlier, and a handwritten list. This is the part that still makes me feel like I can't breathe when I think about it. A handwritten list of boys' names with notes next to each one. My son's name was on it. Bruce Delaney was arrested on a Wednesday afternoon in the parking lot of the rec complex. He was there for a board meeting. The league president issued a statement expressing shock and grief, and assuring families that the organization took these matters with the utmost seriousness. He resigned 4 days later, before anyone could call for it. 6 families had come forward by the time charges were formally filed. The charges were 12 counts: sexual abuse of a minor, aggravated criminal sexual abuse, and child endangerment. 2 more families came forward during the preliminary hearing. The total number of identified victims was 9 boys, ranging in age from 7 to 11, spanning 4 years of the league. The trial was 7 months later. My son did not have to testify in person. His forensic interview video was admitted as evidence. The defense spent considerable time attacking the credibility of the forensic interview process, suggesting Dr. Titem Whitfield had led my son that 9-year-olds were easily influenced. They brought an expert witness who testified about memory contamination in children. Dr. Whitfield testified for the prosecution. I watched that cross-examination from the gallery, and I'll tell you, she was a wall. Every attempt to destabilize her account of the interview methodology met a calm, precise, documented response. She had been doing this work for 22 years. She knew every argument the defense was going to make before they made it. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They convicted on 10 of the 12 counts. The judge sentenced Delaney to 19 years. Given his age, he was 53 at sentencing. The judge remarked that this sentence was intended to be, for all practical purposes, the remainder of his functional life as a free man. He said it directly. I appreciated that. The league itself went through a complete restructuring. New leadership, mandatory reporting training for every coach and staff member, a third-party child safety audit every 2 years. Background checks extended to include any adult with regular unsupervised access to players, not just head coaches. Several of these reforms were pushed by our parent coalition, 15 families who had, by that point, become something I hadn't expected, a community. My son is 11 now. He still plays baseball. Different league, different field, different coaches, 2 of whom we vetted ourselves before he set foot on their field. He made the travel team last spring. I watched him hit a double in the regional semifinal, and I had to bite the inside of my cheek very hard to keep from losing it in the stands. He's in therapy, has been since the summer after everything happened. His therapist, a man in his 40s who he genuinely seems to like, told us at the 6-month check-in that our son had unusually strong protective factors, clear sense of self, strong parental bond, and, his words, a dad who got it right in the car that night. I think about that conversation often. The healing wasn't smooth. There were months when he didn't want to go to practice, when certain kinds of praise from male adults made him tense up. There was a period in 5th grade when he got into 3 fights at school, none of which were really about what they were about. His therapist called it displacement, we called it Tuesday, and we got through it and we kept going. What I know now that I didn't know well enough before, children almost never lie about this. The research on false reports in child sexual abuse cases puts the rate somewhere between 2 and 8%, and in that range, the majority of false reports come from adult third parties, not from the children themselves. When a child tells you something happened, especially something they can barely find the words for, the statistical reality is that they are telling you the truth. I also know that predators in youth sports are not rare anomalies. They exist in rec leagues and elite programs, in church leagues and school programs. They are often the most popular coach, the one the kids love, the one who gives up his weekends for the sport. They build that reputation specifically because it works. It insulates them. It makes parents feel grateful rather than watchful. Watch anyway, not with paranoia, with attention. My wife and I started speaking to parent groups at other leagues in our county. Nothing formal, no matching t-shirts, just 2 parents standing in a rec center meeting room talking about what we wished we had known. We talk about what behavioral changes to look for. We talk about the importance of naming body parts correctly with your kids from a young age, of establishing the clear expectation that secrets about physical contact are always to be told to a parent. We talk about the fact that telling kids to listen to adults without nuance creates the exact vulnerability these people exploit. We talk about the car. Every time at least one parent comes up to us afterward. Sometimes they're visibly shaken. Sometimes they say their child has said something similar and they didn't know what to make of it. Every single time we tell them the same thing. Believe first, investigate second, never the other way around. Last fall, I received an email from a father in a neighboring county. His son played soccer. He'd seen our names mentioned in a county paper's coverage of the Delaney case. He wrote to say that after reading about our situation, he'd had a conversation with his own son, just a check-in, nothing specific, just asking how things were going with the team. His son had disclosed something that night. "Because of what you did," he wrote. I knew to believe him. I have that email printed out and folded in the same drawer where I keep my son's 1st grade class photo and his first baseball card, a Marcus Stroman he picked out himself at a card show and decided was his lucky charm, which he still carries in his bag on game days. My son walked into the kitchen last week while I was making dinner. He was in his baseball pants, cleats still on, tracking red clay across the floor. He leaned against the counter and grabbed a handful of crackers from the box I'd left out. "Dad," he said, same tone as the driveway, but different now, lighter. "Yeah?" I told Tommy today. About what happened to me. He told me something happened to him too, at camp 2 summers ago, and he never told anyone. I told him he should tell his parents. I kept stirring the pan. What did he say? He said he was scared they wouldn't believe him. He paused. I told him my dad believed me. I turned the burner down. Did that help? I think so. He grabbed more crackers. "Is dinner almost done? I'm starving." We ate dinner. We talked about the game. We argued mildly about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher. My son is 11 years old, and he is, in all the ways that matter, okay. He is better than okay. He is better than okay. He is, day by day, becoming a person I am genuinely in awe of. And somewhere in this country right now, there is a 9-year-old boy sitting in a car, in a driveway, or at a kitchen table, or in the back seat on the way home from practice, trying to find the words for something he doesn't have the language for yet. Maybe he's turning something over in his hands. Maybe he's watching his parent's face to see if it's safe. Make it safe. Be the kind of parent whose face doesn't flinch. Listen, believe, then fight like it's the only thing that matters. Because it is. I still think about the Velcro sound. My son sitting in that passenger seat, turning his batting gloves over and over in his hands, that small ripping sound in the dark. He was 9 years old, and he was trying to figure out if I was safe to tell. That's what gets me when I sit with it now. The thing that almost prevented all of it wasn't the predator, wasn't the institution, wasn't the league president running interference. It was the ordinary fear of a child who had been told very carefully that the adults around him would not believe him, that he would lose something he loved, that speaking up was more dangerous than staying quiet. Delaney hadn't just done what he did. He'd also built a wall around it, and that wall was made entirely out of my son's uncertainty about me. So when people ask what I learned from this, the first thing I say is, the relationship you build with your child before anything happens is the only infrastructure that matters when something does. Not the warnings you give them. Not the talks about strangers. The actual texture of your daily life together, whether they have seen over and over that you handle hard things without falling apart, that you don't shoot the messenger, that your face doesn't flinch. My son took a breath in that driveway and told me the truth because somewhere in 9 years of ordinary Tuesday nights, he had decided I could hold it. I don't take credit for that. I just try to stay grateful for it and worthy of it. The second thing I learned is harder to say plainly, but I'll try. When the system started to fold, when Kepler made his call, when the phrase due diligence got used to mean the opposite of due diligence, I had a choice between being reasonable and being effective. I chose effective. I accessed that footage. I'm not going to dress that up. What I knew in that moment was that I had spent 2 weeks being patient and procedural, and my son's name was on a handwritten list in a coach's desk. At some point, caring about the right outcome means you have to think clearly about what actually produces it, not recklessly, not out of rage, clearly. You use what you know, you document everything, you find the people worth trusting, and you don't stop. That's not heroism. That's just not quitting when quitting would be easier. And the third thing, the one I think about most now, watching my son play ball on Saturday mornings, is what it means to keep going after. The healing my son has done didn't happen because the verdict came in or because Delaney got 19 years. It happened because he went to therapy every week, and some weeks were bad, and we went anyway. It happened because his mother and I didn't pretend it was over when it wasn't. It happened because he found out he could carry something heavy and still show up to practice, still hit the ball, still be the kid who tracks mud through the kitchen and argues about the dishwasher. That kind of recovery isn't dramatic. It's just persistent. It's choosing over and over to keep building your life on top of the thing that tried to stop it. What I want every parent to carry out of this is simple. Your child is watching you to learn whether the truth is safe. Make it safe. Not just in the big moments, in the small ones, the daily ones, the ones where it would be easier to not really listen. Those moments are the only preparation that actually works. My son told Tommy to tell his parents. That happened because 9 years ago, I got something right that I didn't even know I was doing. That's the only legacy worth having.